Hey folks, my name is Jen, and today we are going to do hopefully a pretty quickish little chat review thing about everything that I read back in May. So, what did I read back in May? Well, I read 9 books. Pretty good overall. As far as sticking to my spring TBR goes, though, did not do such a good job. Really kind of went off script there for most of the spring. Didn't read too much that was on my actual overall seasonal TBR. So far in the summer, we're doing slightly better. Just trying to really stay on task here. Anyway, let's talk about May. I think what we're first going to talk about very briefly is the book that I actually DNF'd in May. I know, I've actually DNF'd a couple of books so far this year and I keep forgetting to talk about them. But the one that I did DNF back in May was an audiobook. So I started listening to a audiobook romance novel. It was a male romance, part of a series, which is by, let me get the author's name, A.J. Truman. I actually don't know what the series is called. I am partway through an audiobook that is another part of that series, but the one that I actually DNF'd was called The Falcon and the Foe. And these books all seem to be set in this town, this small-ish town it sounds like it might be in either New York or Massachusetts. I can't quite remember, but it's somewhere in New England, a small New England town. And it's got a lot of single dads in it that are just finding romance, again, with other men. So The Falcon and the Foe was about a troop leader named Russ, like part of the Falcons, which is like this town's version of Boy Scouts, I guess, or something like that. And he's like the troop leader. He's kind of a major prick, just super uptight and particular and a pain in the ass. And then his budding romance with Cal, who is a hard-working, overly dramatic, not as uptight father of a 9-year-old boy. They both have 9-year-old boys, I think, or maybe one of their kids is a little older than the other one. Anyway, both have kids that are in the Falcons. And it's an enemies to lovers. And I gave up on it fairly quickly because I did not like either Cal nor Russ. I found both of them to be annoying in their own ways. And yeah, I was not particularly fond of them. And as I think I've mentioned previously before, enemies to lovers is a hard one for me. I've found that what I actually like is rivals to lovers. I actually think I enjoy that a little bit more. And enemies to lovers, I can read it, and some of them I will enjoy immensely, but the characters really need to be endearing, and I didn't find either of them endearing. Like I said, I found both of them annoying, so I just couldn't hack it with that one, so I ended up DNFing it. But I looked at the descriptions of other books within the series and wanted to give them a try as well, so I went for The Fireman and the Flirt, which takes place a little later in the series, I guess, and I am like, what, 60% through that, and I really like it. It's like night and day with those two books. I'm really enjoying it. So yeah, I think I may or may not try out other books in the series or other books by this author. It's just that particular one, The Falcon and the Foe, just didn't do it for me. So that was the book that I DNF'd. On to the books that I actually read in May. Did I read any from my Nightstand of Shame? No, I didn't. Did I read any nonfiction? No, I didn't. Did I read any of the banned books? No, I didn't. But did I read a classic? Yes, I did. The classic that I read was The Sirens of Titan, by Kurt Vonnegut. This is a book of his that, my god, it's like really hard to explain this book without sounding absolutely insane, which honestly I think is something that can be said for a lot of his books. But this is following Malachi Constant. He is a very rich and depraved man, most depraved man on earth, although some of the things that are talked about, at least at the beginning of the book, he doesn't seem that depraved. He seems kind of like a little bit of maybe a spoiled playboy kind of thing, but he's also been like totally neglected by his dad, and like, I don't know, it's like, it's a whole thing. So I wouldn't call him the most depraved man on earth. Maybe not at least at the beginning of the book. I would say that there are other characters in the book that show themselves to be much more depraved than he is, but maybe that's part of the overall, I don't know, messaging point, something of that story. But anyway, kind of rich, not slightly eccentric, but not as eccentric as some other characters, dude, and he is told by this very eccentric man who appears only so often because he went off into space, and there's something with like the planetary alignments and weird shit like that. Anyway, this very eccentric guy tells him that he is going to one day end up on Earth married to this eccentric man's wife, or having a child with this eccentric man's wife, and he's gonna be on like Mars, part of like a Martian thing going on, and crazy shit like that. The guy thinks he's insane, doesn't listen. Hijinks ensue, everybody ends up in space on Mars, and more hijinks ensue. This book, see, I read this one because I came off of another book of his that I read not too long ago, Mother Night. While I found parts of it enjoyable, a lot more of it was not enjoyable, and I didn't particularly like a lot of the characters in it. Of course, that is something about Vonnegut's works, is that sometimes it really is hard to find anything endearing about any of the characters. They're all incredibly deeply flawed, and I think their points are really... their points are not for you to like them. I don't think the readers in general are supposed to enjoy any of the characters, or see themselves in any of the characters. I don't think that's the point. Overall, they are all standing in for humanity, I think, in some aspects, and their journeys are interesting. There's a lot going on within the stories, and like I said, it's not really for enjoyment, it's for like what message is Vonnegut trying to get across with a lot of these characters. In general, they're all very quirky, they're all very flawed, they're all kind of crazy. Wasn't too into Malachi that much, didn't know what to think by the end of the book. But that's not to say that this book also didn't, like, make me emotional at any point in it. It definitely did. This is, I think, besides Slaughterhouse-Five and the Tralfamadorians, this is, like, one of the most space-y books of his that I've read so far. Has to do with a lot of space travel, has to do with a lot of like weird wibbly-wobbly timey-wimey shit. Odd things going on. The narrative changes like halfway through the book. It's like really interesting. I didn't find anything endearing about the characters, but that's not to say at times reading this I didn't feel at least some level of compassion for them and the shit that they have gone through or are going through due to the weird-ass machinations of this one eccentric dude that nothing needed to happen the way it had to happen if not for this one particular guy. It's fucked, you guys. It's just really weird. Something that I did have a problem with in here, which is why my rating is a little bit lower, part of why it is a little bit lower, besides the overall enjoyment levels, is there is some non-consensual sex. It doesn't take place on the page, but it is referenced. So that is in here, and I wasn't a big fan of that. You know, that was not great. There's also some mild racism within here, but I don't think that, I don't think there's anything malicious within that. I think it was just in here as like an additional part of showing society's issues. I think that that was part of it. I don't think there was anything particularly malicious in here. I think it was partially a tool used to show bullshit that goes on in society, I think. This was another tough one, I have to say. I keep thinking I'm gonna find something that I enjoy as much as Slaughterhouse-Five and God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater, and even Timequake. But so far, the last couple of books that I have read, I have not enjoyed as much as those other ones. But I think it's probably still worth a read. It's definitely a really out there book. I have a couple of quotes in here that I'll share that were ones that I particularly enjoyed or felt a particular way about. But I think, honestly, this book, the ultimate point in all of it, you know, is ultimately, much like all of his books, is social commentary, a look at war, at society, at religion. Religion's a big part of this one, as well as issues with authority overall. And especially with religion and war, the issue of authority would be up there, as well as the point of it all. Like, what is the fucking point of all of this? What's the point of any of it? Is really something I think that is questioned a lot in here. I think to finish off this little thoughts, my disjointed thoughts about this book, because it's a weird book and I don't feel like I have the bandwidth to really discuss a lot of it in here, but every failure of Earthling leadership has been traceable to a lack on the part of the leader, says Rumford, of at least one of these three things. Enough of these fizzles of leadership in which millions die for nothing or less, said Rumford. Let us have for a change a magnificently led few who die for a great deal. Rumford had that magnificently led few on Mars, and he was their leader. He had showmanship, he was genially willing to shed the blood of others, he had a plausible new religion to introduce at the war's end, and he had methods for prolonging the period of repentance and horror that would follow the war. These methods were variations on one theme, that Earth's glorious victory over Mars had been a tawdry butchery of the virtually unarmed saints who had waged feeble war on Earth in order to weld the peoples of that planet into a monolithic brotherhood of man. And another quote. What happened to you? Said the congregation. Unc shook his head vaguely. He could think of no apt condensation of his adventures for the obviously ritual mood. Something great was plainly expected of him. He was not up to greatness. He exhaled noisily, letting the congregation know that he was sorry to fill them with his colorlessness. I was a victim of a series of accidents, he said. He shrugged. As are we all, he said. The cheering and dancing began again. That's one of those quotes I feel like from Vonnegut you could probably knit on a fucking pillow. I'm a victim of accidents, as are we all. I ended up giving Sirens of Titan 4 stars. The next book I read, I actually read 2 poetry collections, the first of which was 1,000 Mornings by Mary Oliver. I have never read any Mary Oliver before. I have heard a lot about her writing. I've heard a lot about the beauty of her writing, the connections with nature, and societal commentary, and etc. Political commentary sometimes through the basis of looking through nature and whatnot. And, you know, I was fully expecting that. That's not exactly what I found within this collection, and I'm wondering if it's because I went with a fully random collection that I just saw and not a collection that I have heard people talk about before. This says it's supposed to be full of imagery that transports us to the marshland and coastline of her beloved home, Provincetown, Massachusetts. Now, I think I talked about it in my book haul video, but I've been to P-Town. I've seen parts of it. I think it is beautiful. I would like to go back there to visit it again. And there was definitely a lot of that imagery within this book, but I guess it's not exactly what I was expecting. It's not something that I enjoyed as immensely as I was expecting it to, based upon what I've heard others say about some of her poetry, as well as the couple of poems that I have heard of hers previously. Again, maybe it's just because this is a completely different collection than one that I have heard of hers referenced before. I haven't actually heard anyone talk about this, I don't think. I'm more likely to have heard Devotions, I think, is her big one. That's the one that I hear people reference more, and I think that's the one that I've heard a couple of poems from. So maybe I should have tried to locate that one instead of A Thousand Mornings. Was all right. I'll share a couple of short poems in here that I actually really liked. But overall, this was all right. It's just, some of them were really pretty. There were a couple that felt the borderline of pretentious. I kind of almost rolled my eyes a little bit. I don't know. I feel overall just a little lackluster about it. This was not exactly what I was picturing and not exactly what I was expecting, which I ultimately is probably more of a me problem than a problem with this book or with the writing in general. But again, it was not exactly what I was expecting and not exactly what I had been told previously about Mary Oliver's writing. Again, mostly probably a me problem, and I will try her again. I just might actually try her collection called, I believe, Devotions, which is one that, like I said, I've heard people reference a lot. But I will share a couple of the poems I actually liked. The first is The Mockingbird. All summer, the mockingbird, in his pearl gray coat and his white windowed wings, flies from the hedge to the top of the pine and begins to sing, but is neither lilting nor lovely. For he is the thief of other sounds, whistles and truck brakes and dry hinges, plus all the songs of other birds in his neighborhood. Mimicking and elaborating, he sings with humor and bravado, so I have to wait a long time for the softer voice of his own life to come through. He begins by giving up all his usual flutter and settling down on the pine's forelock, then looking aground, as though to make sure he's alone. Then he slaps each wing against his breast, where his heart is, and, copying nothing, begins, easing into it, as though it was not half so easy as rollicking, as though his subject now was his true self, which of course was as dark and secret as anyone else's, and it was too hard, perhaps you understand, to speak or to sing it to anything or anyone but the sky. That one really made me feel something. I encountered the first mockingbird I've ever encountered, actually, just a couple of years ago, and that was a really cool experience because to me a mockingbird has always seemed like some kind of almost like a near mythical creature. I hear people talk about, there's a book that's title is in there. The title has their name in it. Like, I've heard all about mockingbirds, and I didn't think that I would ever come across one in the wild, and I have twice now, actually. And they are really interesting. I wouldn't say they're much of a bird to look at, really. I mean, they're about as pretty as any other particular songbird, but their personalities, I think, is something that I particularly enjoy. I like listening to them a lot. So, yeah, just in that sense, really enjoyed that. And I also really enjoyed overall that part of the poem of maybe just not sharing your true self with others. Sometimes it's hard to share your complete, unfiltered true self with others, except maybe this guy. Yeah, I don't know. I really enjoyed that one. That one made me think, pause a little bit. The other one I really liked is pretty short and simple. The poet compares human nature to the ocean from which we came. The sea can do craziness, it can do smooth. It can lie down like silk breathing, or toss havoc shoreward. It can give gifts or withhold all. It can rise, ebb, froth like an incoming frenzy of fountains. Or it can sweet talk entirely. As I can too, and so, no doubt, can you and you. I gave this 3 stars. Next poetry collection I read was Horoscopes for the Dead by Billy Collins. Back on my Billy Collins bullshit. He is one of my favorite living poets. I enjoy his writing quite a bit. He can get a little bit dark and morbid here and there, but he also has oftentimes a playful nature with some of his poems. and I guess a little bit of maybe third wall breaking, really talking about the poet in the action of writing poetry. Or he tends to write a lot of or maybe not a lot, but I've read more than one poem of his about a poet writing poetry, or a poet trying to write poetry anyway, and being hopelessly distracted or thinking too much about something, and that in of itself becomes the poem. He was our poet laureate for a while there. I think he is a very interesting poet in general. This one is not a collection that I have read before, and I really enjoyed it. I think there is another collection of his that probably is my tip-top favorite, but I would say that this one is now kind of up there. His style overall just works for me. Like I said, there's a playfulness in here, there's a sense of humor, there's a dark dreariness underneath that I'm also kind of digging a little bit. They're overall simple poems. They are fairly simple, but there's often deep metaphors underneath. There's a lot of humor that I enjoy. Sometimes there are things that he says about a partner in his life, I guess, that I am not always okay with, just like the tone of them or something, but then again, I mean, that's not for me to say. That's his own writing, and again, the speaker of the poem might not always be about the poet. It might not always be the poet themselves. It could be somebody else, but I think I will share a couple of the poems from here that I really liked. Let's see. Here's one that I really enjoyed. This one made me laugh out loud, actually. It's called Palermo. It was foolish of us to leave our room. The empty plaza was shimmering, the clock looked ready to melt. The heat was a mallet striking a ball and sending it bouncing into the nettles of summer. Even the bees had knocked off for the day. The only thing moving besides us, and we had stopped moving under an awning, was a squirrel who was darting this way and that, as if he were having second thoughts about crossing the street, his head and tail twitching with indecision. You were looking in a shop window, but I was watching the squirrel, who now rose up on his hind legs. After pausing to look in all directions, began to sing in a beautiful voice a melancholy aria about life and death, his forepaws clutched against his chest, his face full of longing and hope, as the sun beat down on the roofs and awnings of the city, and the earth continued to turn and hold in position the moon, which would appear later that night as we sat in a cafe, and I stood up on the table with the encouragement of the owner and sang for you and the others the song the squirrel had taught me how to sing. That's what I mean about, like, just this ultimate, just playful. And this one, I don't know, I found kind of interesting. It's called Genesis. It was late, of course, just the two of us still at the table, working on a second bottle of wine, when you speculated that maybe Eve came first and Adam began as a rib that leaped out of her side one paradisal afternoon. Maybe, I remember saying, because much was possible back then, and I mentioned the talking snake and the giraffe sticking their necks out of the ark, their noses up in the pouring Old Testament rain. I like a man with a flexible mind, you said then, lifting your candlelit glass to me, and I raised mine to you and began to wonder what life would be like as one of your ribs. To be with you all the time, riding under your blouse and skin, caged under the soft weight of your breasts. Your favorite rib, I am assuming, if you ever bothered to stop and count them, which is just what I did later that night after you had fallen asleep, and we were fitted tightly back to front, your long legs against the length of mine, my fingers doing the crazy numbering that comes of love. I don't know what else to say really about this collection other than I enjoyed it. I had fun with it. Like I said, I really like his style of writing in general. It's playful yet serious, simple yet deep, and yeah, I think this is, like I said, not my favorite collection of his, but definitely up there near the top. I gave this 4 stars. Next I read a romance novel. It was an audiobook, and it was Body Check by Elle Kennedy. Now I am, of course, completely aware now that Elle Kennedy is the one who wrote the books that are part of the Off Campus series, which is taking everybody by storm. I have not watched the series yet. I've seen clips from it. I do intend to watch it at some point. I'm just still on my Heated Rivalry kick, and I'm probably going to rewatch that before I go around and watch Off Campus. But yeah, I am now aware that Elle Kennedy also wrote that series, which I may or may not check out. It depends on the show. If I actually enjoy watching the show, then I might also read the books, because this audiobook of hers that I listened to, I had mixed feelings on. So yeah, we'll see. Like I said, it's called Body Check. It is about a professional hockey player. He was a little bit of a playboy, but now he's gotten a little bit older. I think he's like in his late 20s. I don't think he's 30 yet, but he's at least in his late 20s. And he's done playing around. He's wants someone to spend time with. He wants someone special to spend time with. He wants to have love, maybe a family at some point. He is done being the playboy. And he's just kind of like come up on this decision and trying to figure all of that out when into his life waltzes this brilliant woman. She actually is the daughter of the owner of the hockey team he plays for. He does not find that out until a little bit further in the book. They end up going home together because she has come home to support her father in the wake of his divorce from her stepmother. And big time game cheating scandals start up and throw everything into disarray. So she is home trying to help her dad, trying to do stuff, and also being encouraged by her best friend that maybe she should branch out a little bit. She has been in this relationship with this dude back where she lives out in California. This is now in, oh my goodness, I forget where this book takes place. I feel like it's supposed to be in like Chicago or something. I don't fucking know. Anyway, has this guy that she's a professor, and he is also a professor, but they are on a break because he won't sleep with her until they're serious, and she's just like, she wants that, but she also doesn't want that, but whatever. So anyway, on a break. So this is complicated already. Meets this sexy looking guy in a bar, decides one night stand, perfect. They have such a good time together. He really wants to continue seeing her. She wants to keep this not serious at all, because this is not, she was supposed to have a one night stand. Even though she knows she's not built for one night stands, but she is trying desperately to do that. And she hates hockey, by the way, and this just gets more complicated because finding out he plays hockey, he is a player on the team her father owns. Again, there's a game cheating scandal, there's things going on, it gets really complicated really fast. What did I think about this book? The premise had promise. You know, it had some promise for my, even though my explaining of it probably sounds really complicated and stupid, but like, I'm not explaining it correctly probably. But it did have some promise. I generally tend to prefer not so much a super slow burn, but I definitely usually tend to prefer characters getting to know each other and catching feelings before they hop into bed. Most of the time before that, I'm not really into the spice on the first page thing, or not quite on the first page, but that early on, I guess, which is really saying something, I suppose, because of how into Heated Rivalry and everything I am. But like, I mean, if you've read it, if you've watched that series, those two were down bad before they started getting on each other, so it's fine. But yeah, anyway, I don't always go for that, but I did not actually mind it because I thought, well, this is a situation that feels a little more like not quite terrible. I'm not super big on the we were on a break kind of situation, but you know what, everybody's an adult, whatever, I guess. Even though her guy that she's on a break from doesn't know about the whatever. Anyway, that's more complicated. The spice was good. I had no problems with the spice levels. It was spicy. I was into it. I liked it. It's very well done. Pretty okay with that. I will say that's probably the best part of it, though. I had problems with the characters and their stupidity. A little bit of the main male character, but the main female character is the one who I had the most problem with. To be honest, she had, in my opinion, she made a lot of dumb decisions. She didn't deal with things like how I thought she should have dealt with them necessarily, which I mean, it drives the plot continuing forward. I guess that's fine, but like, I don't know, sometimes how she acted with stuff, I couldn't quite believe that she was supposed to be the big age she was and a fully fledged professor at a university. Because she just was so kind of so immature here and there. So I don't know. I didn't really like her at times. Her dad's a shitheel. Just putting that out there. Dad's a total fucking shitheel. And the hockey player was alright for the most part, but then he got kind of cocky, and it wasn't cocky with like a sweetness underneath. It was like cocky on the edge of being a little bit domineering, and that is something that I'm not into. Did not enjoy that part of his personality. It was not, I don't find it endearing, to be honest. So yeah, wasn't super into that. Domineering is not charming, in my humble opinion. But yeah, I think his acting was okay. Like the narrative quality, that was alright. And yeah, like I said, I think the spice was some of the best part in it. There were a couple of plot points that were so obvious, honestly. I kind of saw them way earlier within the book. Like, I was not surprised by them at all. So all of this is to say I ended up giving that audiobook like 3 stars. And the last things that I read back in May, I actually reread a manga series, a 4-book series, and this is because I am continuing with my reading the manga that I own and seeing if there are any that I'm willing to part with at this point before we get to moving all my books down to the basement. So yeah, this series that I reread is called Haven't You Heard? I'm Sakamoto. This is a 4-book manga series following Sakamoto. He is a high school student. Some supernaturally weird shit about him. But he is overall a high school student in Japan. And this follows him and his classmates, some of their teachers, in their day-to-day life over the course of a year with Sakamoto. Sakamoto is coolest. He is just the absolute coolest at everything that goes on. Anything that happens, if it's dumb shit, he will do it in a cool way. He will do it stylishly as hell. That's just who Sakamoto is. He brings greatness to everyone around them, pissing them off, even in some aspects. The slackers of the school end up respecting him, ultimately. The nerdy look at him. The nerdy and the outcasts look at him as friends. The girls are in love with him. The teachers are begrudgingly okay with him. Can't find any disrespect, even though, man, he gets away with some shit sometimes. He is polite, like super polite all the time. Just, again, does everything stylishly. This particular thing, this thing of standing out in the hall, holding these buckets, look at him. He does it so stylishly. Why does he do that? That's just his way. That's just how Sakamoto is. Honestly, this series, Sakamoto is probably not human. I think it's very clear that he is quite possibly something else. Maybe an alien, perhaps. Definitely not completely human. Some of the things that he does, decisions he makes, things that he says, different stuff, very clear. Yeah, probably not a human. But everybody loves him. And this series is so weird. It is one of those slice of life, absolutely ridiculous, shenanigan-filled shit shows. It's 4 books, and I guess ultimately not that much happens within the series. It's one of those little series that's very weird, but left me, by the time I finished rereading them, with just this wholesome feeling in my heart. I watched this anime when it came out several years ago. My husband and I both watched it. We really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it so much I got this series and loved it. My cat, I will share pictures of him. We named him Sakamoto after the character within this series because he's a dumbass, but he does things quite stylishly and also quite ridiculously and sometimes quite stupidly because he is a weird cat. But anyway, I obviously love this series. It's silly, its humor pushes boundaries in some ways. There is a problematic part within here where the mother of a classmate of his becomes incredibly obsessed with him to the point of it being like, madam, you are like in your 40s and this is a 16, 17-year-old boy. You need to... It's getting weird. For humor, I think there's something deeply troubling about it, but it doesn't go farther really than just a kind of awkward, really cringy obsession, thankfully. I have to say, yeah, the first 3 volumes, really weird. I gave them all 4 stars because they're funny, but they're not perfect in any way. This last volume, however, got a 5-star because, wow, volume 4, it shows growth. There are full circle moments within it, and this ultimately shows how much of an effect that Sakamoto had on the people around him and how much that they have had on his life too. And it's just, oh my gosh, I actually almost got emotional within the last couple of pages, which is hilarious thinking about this series. But that's why this one got a little bit of a higher rating than the others. I really loved it, and this is definitely a series that I'm going to hold on to, obviously. So yeah, it was everything that I read over the course of May. Had overall, I'd say, a pretty decent time. No real complaints, although a couple of the books were maybe not as good as I was hoping for, but still, overall, I think that was a pretty solid reading month, despite the lower ratings on a couple of books and the DNF, of course. Yeah. Let me know if you guys have read any of these, what your thoughts about any of them are, if you have any recommendations about anything based on what I said here. And thank you for watching. Thank you for always watching. If you're new here and would like to subscribe, please do so. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.